So, disclaimer, obviously this is all subjective. I'm just a random person on the internet who decided to upload her random opinions on these movies up because talking about movies makes me happy. 2, I'm going to probably avoid giving like too heavy of a set of spoilers, but there might be some vague ones or very slight ones. I'll try not to spoil like the ending, because even though a lot of these are super old, you may want to go back. And I went in these completely blind for the majority of them, actually. And if you wanted to do that, allowing some room for that. And 3, you know what the Oscars are. So, roll the first movie. So, y'all, Wings is good. It's so good. I realized about like 15 minutes to 25 minutes in, definitely about the 25-minute mark, that I come into this with this pretty negative mindset where I was expecting to be amazed by like the technical aspects of these films and, being able to find decent plot and characterization. But in terms of being like an average moviegoer and being entertained or engaged with these films, being kind of like, no. But Wings said, not me. I don't know who you're talking about, but it's not me. Because Wings is so good. And like, I did not anticipate being so invested in these characters. The relationship between David and Jack is such a foundation of this entire film. And watching them go from like, being aspirational, just looking up to the skies and just imagining themselves up there to actually all of it coming to fruition and all the dangers that happened with being involved in the war and their worries and their wants and just even being nervous that if one of them forgot to take their like good luck tokens on the, I almost said on the ship, what? On the flight with them. The acting is still so incredibly expressive, and you can see that connection that film and the performances still have to theater. Like the performers are still acting for the back row in a lot of cases. The technical stuff with this film, my voice getting higher because are you kidding me? Being hyper aware of the fact that every single thing that they shot had to be real and that the director had to be incredibly intentional with every single thing he wanted to show. And being aware of the fact that these people are putting themselves in actual danger to capture some of these gorgeous shots in midair. It's in the public domain as of this year. I'm linking it down below. I talked about this film at length for days after. I think it also set my expectations up a little higher because Wings. She did that. This movie was awkward. Will I be able to convey exactly what I mean by that? Maybe. This Wings was a silent film, my first silent film, and this is a movie with sound. And a lot of the editors aren't quite used to editing with sound involved. So you have these really long silent pauses. I don't believe there was a score, if I'm remembering correctly. So it makes the pauses in conversations and the transitions really, really odd. It's like an uncomfortable silence at a dinner table sometimes with these scenes. And there are other things that make the film awkward, like the main guy, a little bit more of a slight spoiler. It's more of a medium-sized spoiler, but he takes a bit of a liking to Hank's sister. And after talking about how much he used to see her as a little girl, and then it's just weird the way they go about interactions sometimes. And then also the whole crux of this entire film is these two girls being talented enough in their pursuit of being on stage. But when they get on stage or do practice rehearsals, it's not that they aren't great singers and dancers, but just for how the audience is supposed to kind of perceive them to be like uber talented. They should definitely get their big break. Oh my God, they deserve it so much. The the song and dances that we see for them are kind of like, oh, okay, good job. And then including other performances, there's one moment where there's a ballerina where just her tips of her toes are slamming onto the stage over and over again rhythmically for like 2 minutes. And I'm just like, oh, this is painful in multiple kinds of ways. There's also a lot of telling where a character will be like, you know, she's so beautiful and she's so kind and isn't she swell? She's caring and I care so much about her. I love her to death. And but then that's it's not all of what you get to display that, but it is most of what you get to display that. And also another major part of the plot for this is the fact that like, if people just talked, it would be solved. So those are always fun plots to watch for an hour and 45 minutes. Yeah, so the Broadway melody. This film broke me. It was amazing and difficult to watch, but that is the point. In B. Conner Wine's video on this film and its recent remake, the discussion about whether a war film can be anti-war came up. And I remember that's something I've kind of pondered myself, especially when 1917 came out and people were talking about that specific topic before. And I didn't know. It's one of those things where I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, but All Quiet on the Western Front, and also learning about the history of the film and audience members that saw it back then and what this movie did to them and their reaction to it, and how I walked away from watching this. If you're someone that thinks it can't exist, I think trying this movie may make you wonder that, because man, watching Paul go from treating war like a week-long trip to Disney World to being hardened and like walking death himself was such a well done arc. There's this very, very clear portrayal of how war changes people and how it sends off kids to die, and how if you take the uniforms off, very likely to be brothers is literally something that is stated outright in the film. There's this entire segment of the film where it starts off with Paul and his entire group just the constant whistles of bombs dropping, like for minutes and minutes and minutes on end, and it doesn't end and you don't even get a break, and then you head right onto the battlefield and you just have this unending shot of just death and just boys and men dying, and it is gruesome. Whew, man. That movie beat my ass up. Okay, this movie was when I finally got to one of the films that I was expecting when I first started this. The kind of overblown, overacted, even for the style of acting that was popular back then. A little overacted, romanticizing a time period that probably shouldn't really be romanticized, and sanitizing it to the point that it feels sometimes inaccurate, and stereotypes of Black Americans, harsh words about marginalized groups, and just following a large amount of time in a way that feels like you're skipping over the important parts while simultaneously having things be way too drawn out. It got better a bit as it went on. So it wasn't as excruciating as I was anticipating within the first 30, 40 minutes. Though the film felt a little cyclical in he would experience some kind of like egregious, rotten thing, would try to solve it, the town would adjust, the family would adjust, rinse and repeat. And you know what? I'm going to do a quick spoiler. The husband just ups and leaves his family like multiple times for years at a time. There's a part where he leaves just the day of. Doesn't tell his wife until he's about to hop on a horse in a minute. Leaves for 5 years. With the wife has a son who's like a few years old. And was he a few years old? He might have been, whatever. A son and an infant daughter. And leaves for 5 years. He comes back and is like, oh, hey, my family, hey. Picks up the little girl like, and I'm just like, she don't know you. What am I meant to do with this character where we end up mostly following the wife, where she's the one that gets to see the change of, you know, this manifest destiny portion of American history to the state of Oklahoma becoming the state of Oklahoma. We basically follow her the whole time. The characterization we mainly get to see, actually, do we get to see it? Because a lot of her characterization happens after time jumps. A baffling movie. Again, not as excruciating as I was anticipating when I started it, but a really baffling movie. Like the structure of it, the way they decided to show the changes of the area that they were in, which, how we were meant to perceive the husband. It's just a lot of like, it felt like the creators, the director, the writers were like a little confused about how they wanted to go about any of it. I don't actually have a ton to say about this movie. Saying it feels like not a ton happens in it, it feels incorrect. It's just, the only reason it feels like to me that not a ton happens is because there's just a lot of individuals where their circumstances and their stories intersect. And I don't feel as though I cared enough about them to be super invested. The only person I really, really cared a lot about was Kringeline, who was basically like Ned Flanders with a terminal illness. It's not a spoiler, you find out within the first couple minutes. With a terminal illness who kind of just wants to ball out before he goes. And he's the sweetest, too sweet, sometimes the sweetest. And I know that a lot of, especially the very last line of the film, which I'm not going to spoil, but you kind of get that the whole point is people with their own histories, their own stories, meet each other, leave, and that's just kind of how it goes. That's just kind of how life goes. I get that, but that's still, I know this one's going to be a problem because I know that this one, at least from my very, very brief research, is one that is very, very well loved. But at least for me, it just kind of felt cavalcade. This movie was boring. This movie was boring. Woo! This was the first one. Even with the Broadway melody and even with Cimarron, did I ever actually look up how to pronounce that movie? Even with everything that was not Wings and All Quiet on the Western Front, I did not ever think I want to watch this film on 1.5 speed. Please. Even if I was kind of like, meh about them, never at any point was I was like, can I fast forward? Please, God. No. But Cavalcade? Man, I do appreciate movies. I do like movies that follow a group of people or a person through historical events, trying to pick one point of view through all of this turmoil and all of these changes in the nation that they're from, or just their surroundings. I get that. But the thing is, you have to want to follow or care about the people that the point of view is coming from. And this film does not do that. It just throws tragedy after tragedy after tragedy at this family without grounding them in anything else. And it's just like, okay. Like, for example, oh God, why? You have the scene, an ocean liner sailing across the ocean. The words and numbers, April 1912, pop up on screen. You already know where this is going, but they haven't said it yet, but you already know where this is going. You have the son of the family and his wife, his new wife. They're on a honeymoon. Beautiful, beautiful. Like, what could they be talking about? They're on their honeymoon. What could they be talking about? The conversation starts with her saying, "What if we died tonight?" What if we died tonight? That is what the discussion starts at. That is the center point of the entire discussion. And they conclude that it would be okay. If they died tonight, they would be okay with that. Really normal conversation. Really, really normal conversation to be having. As the two of them are discussing this, the song, what is it? Near My God to Thee. That violin song starts playing already. It's still, the ship is still sailing, still going, still trucking along. They're already playing it while they talk about this. And after that conclusion of, if we die tonight, I would be totally fine with that, they walk away. The camera pans down to a lifesaver, and it says, Titanic. Surprise, Titanic. And that's the way that this film goes about its tragedies. It feels like a lot of them are like some, toss it out there. Oh, that's all you get. I do this movie. This was cute. Like, this was quite cute. This is one of those films where, like, because I'm a modern day audience member, why'd I put that in quotes? I am. But I'm more used to certain types of films winning Best Picture, so a romantic comedy doing so is surprising to me, but I shouldn't be surprised. They hadn't defined what a Oscar-winning Best Picture, they hadn't figured that all out yet. The beginning, a lot of the jokes were like these kind of endearing, like, dad jokes a bit. It was really nice to see Clark Gable. I've only seen Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind, so watching more of his films, because there is another Clark Gable film coming up. Cute. I don't have much to say other than it being cute. I do think that one thing with me when it comes to any romance film, especially ones where where the romance is not the main point, which does not include this movie, but one thing about when characters fall in love very, very quickly, I can kind of be like, sometimes about it, but at least with this, I get to see more of the bantering, bickering type of, I do feel like the ending was missing a scene, but that didn't really bother me too much. But yeah, this is one of the ones where it's like, I could see popping this in on a Friday when you can't figure out what else you want to watch. That did not sound like a compliment, but I kind of meant it as one, okay? This is another one of the films where I was really, really impressed by the technical aspects of it, because the shots that they were able to get with the seas kind of thrashing that ship around in storms and the entire vessel on fire at one point. And I'm just like, y'all had to do all this yourself. There was really no in post for any of this. It was really fascinating to watch all the different shots and kind of think about like how much coverage they had to consider and how intentional, just like Wings, how incredibly intentional they had to be. Like, absolutely had to be. The plot comes to a screeching halt for me when this is really a spoiler. It's a very mild spoiler where they kind of end up on an island and you get a little bit of romance kind of sprinkled in. And I was not into any kind of romance, anything in this film. It just felt off. It felt like it kind of became, even though the location was, yes, they're on an island, but it felt like a little bit of a different movie. And I was like, okay, I want to get back to the plot was still happening, but I was like, can we get back to the plot? Get back on the ship. Get back on that ship. My favorite part of this movie was someone that I hated. The captain? This bitch? I was ready to box. Oh my God, the hatred, the visceral hatred in my veins for the captain. Oh man, the visceral hatred I had for this character was so intense. I was ready for the mutiny. This is not a spoiler, it's in the title. I was ready for the mutiny like 45 minutes before it happened. How brutal and selfish and inconsiderate and petty and just, Charles Laughton, he MVP of the carried this film. You have to have so much in order for the mutiny, for the character's mutiny to make sense to you, for you to want to root for their mutiny, for them to, be betraying their country. You have to believe their reasons for it. And the captain, the performance that backed that up, you are ready for lightning to strike just him, just his performance alone. Mwah, 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 mwah. About an hour into this film, I kind of wondered, like, am I watching like a less saccharine The Greatest Showman with like more meetings about contracts and recruitment and money and like a sprinkle more blackface? Like, is that what I'm watching? Is that what I'm watching? I was wrong. Not exactly, no. But again, a modern audience thing, approaching this with another movie in mind that doesn't quite fit. Was I intensely invested in his, come up? Not necessarily, but around the middle of the movie, right after the intermission, right before the intermission, you have like musical number on a literal stage that has nothing to do with the characters really or the plot, followed by musical number on a literal stage that has nothing really to do with the characters or the plot, followed by another musical number on a literal stage, that etc. Another one. And I remember watching, and the thing is, gorgeous, the singing, but minus the blackface performance, but the performances, gorgeous singing, wonderful dancing, like in sync choreography when you had groups. The staging was beautiful. The costumes were super extravagant. There's a scene where the stage turns to reveal, more aspects of, more people singing, more dancers, more just this like expansive reveal of such beautiful art, essentially. And after that, I was like, I get it though. Like, I don't know why it kept going initially. I was like, I don't quite get why it kept going. But when I finished, I was like, oh, okay, obviously I knew it was a biopic by the time I got a few minutes into the film. You can kind of tell. But I didn't realize that the whole point of the movie for, the creators was to put Ziegfeld's, produced works onto film. That was the whole point. After a while, where like someone asked me if I've seen the film, I am going to remember that. So they did what they set out to do, because that is going to stay in my head. The rest of the film was obviously a biopic of that producer, and it's a little less memorable, but, to avoid repeating myself, that I feel like the creators may not mind that. one plot line that I eat up all the time is when you take a writer, a group of writers, or a group of journalists, sometimes a detective, but usually mainly like writers or journalists, coming together to uncover something insidious and horrific that a powerful and ever-present entity, doesn't always have to be government entity, but just any powerful and overbearing and incredibly influential entity is covering up. I love plot lines like that. I eat it up. This film, All the President's Men, Spotlight, you'll see when we get to Spotlight, that's a while from now, but you'll see. I love that plot line. And the latter half of Zola is that. The first half is basically the standard, obviously not standard for the time. This helped create the standard, I'm sure. Pretty much the standard biopic of following him from nothing to, getting his first payment from his writing, which, I felt that. Getting his first payment from his writing to when he is rich and famous and complacent when the truth comes to him. And then the latter half becomes that plot line that I am genuinely obsessed with. And also a bit of a courtroom drama where I'm a sucker. I've talked a lot about the acting of a lot of these performers in these films, but I'm a sucker for that classic courtroom drama monologue. I can't help myself. When a performer does it really well, it hits. But the way that they went about showcasing his life and celebrating, all the trials and tribulations he went through to get to where he was kind of set up how big of a deal it was for him to take on this case and how much of his reputation would suffer and all that he built up and how it could come, crumbling down with deciding to be, the speaker of truth. Having the first part be that standard biopic worked out for setting up that courtroom drama. And through, very, very quick research after I finished the movie, I found that Dreyfus was also arrested either in part or in total because he was Jewish. And Jack Warner, the CEO, who also was Jewish, was told to get rid of any mention of Dreyfus being Jewish in dialogue, as to not offend a certain group of people in Germany at the time. A film with a hyper focus on truth, being told to remove aspects of it. Yikes. Also, I don't know who that man is on that poster. I don't know who that man is. Who is that man? Who is that? So this one was another cute one. The rom-coms, they're cute. These are the ones where I don't have too much to say because they follow what you would expect after you read the premise. I will say some of the eccentric aspects of the family seem super, super heightened in some scenes where you're okay, I get it. They're quirky. I get it. They're quirky. One thing about this film is that with all of the other instances, some of them I didn't mention because I'm trying not to take forever to talk about all 11 of these films, is that all of the ones that had little instances of romance or where romance was the main point, like it happened one night, a lot of them did have the kind of falling in love fast trope, which usually doesn't hit with me. And this film was no different, but the chemistry between the leads was more fitting for me and worked well. So it kind of helped out with me not being a massive fan of that aspect of some of the romances in the film that I watched during this. They had a lot of chemistry. James Stewart came with a charisma, and it worked between the two of them. One interesting thing is that the character that really gets the arc, the actual character arc, is the uppity banker father. He's really the only one that gets a very well-defined character arc, which is interesting because you would think it'd be one of the love interests, if not both of them, but at least one of them. But it's nothing wrong with them being static, but it's just interesting that it was more so the father that was the one that had the change over the course of the film. And it made him a bit of an interesting character for me. I do think that the ending and how it leads up to it with the very Chekhov's gun of a harmonica, if you see it, you'll understand what I mean, was a little silly, but the silliness worked. And the harmonica being a Chekhov's gun and kind of representing a lot for the father, made it so that it still felt really satisfying. I don't feel too intensely about this. It was cute. That's what I mean. But it's cute in one of the ways where it's like, it feels like it would be one of those films where it's like a really big hit in theaters in the mid 90s. And then people do that thing where they, in New York City, they know where the house is. So they'll be like, oh, and they'll take a quick picture. And then that's about it. That is it for this one. I do plan to do the 40s and 50s in time. Despite what the title says, I didn't really suffer a lot. I enjoyed myself for the most part. Cavalcade can kick rocks, Jesus. But other than that, this was like really fun. Even when I was a child, I loved watching the Oscars and kind of trying to watch all the films and picking a movie and rooting for one of them like it was my Super Bowl. And I always knew that like, I'm going to watch all of them. I'm going to go back and watch all of them. It took me forever, clearly. I'm not a child anymore. It took me a long time to get to it. And I just don't want to make my caregivee suffer with me talking however long this video has been. Actually, it would be worse because they don't get the edited version of this. You don't get the edited version if I talk to them about it. So despite the title, I really do love talking about movies. It makes me happy. And yeah, if I had to pick one that I would never watch again, Cavalcade. Cavalcade. The ones that I can see myself picking up again, you could probably tell by the way I talked about them, you know, All Quiet on the Western Front in the right headspace. 'Cause I don't always want to cry. I don't always want to cry. And The Life of Emile Zola. That one, I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone, but like for me, I will definitely be watching that movie again at some point. And it's not my find. Everybody, like plenty of people know about this movie, but for me, my gem, my find, Wings. Wings is that bitch, man. Wings. Ugh, Wings, Wings, Wings. I loved Wings. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Yeah. Hope you have a good day. Go watch Wings. Go watch Wings. Go watch Wings, please.